her, right? And that's not what she's about. What Rand, when she uses the word self-interest or selfishness, she's talking about self-development is probably the term that I would use instead of selfishness, because however you want to cut it in English, selfishness always has a bad connotation. So I like using terms that she's really getting at, something like self-development, flourishing, that kind of thing, rather than even self-interest, I find is a complicated term. But clearly we can see a difference between self-centeredness, which is a bad thing for her, and self-interest or self-development or something like that, which is outward-looking, not inward-looking. Obviously, the right to self-determination in one's own life. I'm going to say a little bit more in my third talk about rights, but basically this notion that we have a right to self-determination, going back to the point I raised earlier, who owns your life? Well, basically you own your life. You have a right to self-determination, and that's what she wants to emphasize. And it's your life, you're responsible for it, and so in a sense, it's another sort of sense of selfishness that is oriented towards yourself. You're the one responsible for your life, nobody else is. At least that's the way she thinks it ought to be, not just is, but ought to be as well. Okay, so here's another quotation I pulled out. The good of a society is made possible precisely by the fact that it was not forced on anyone as a moral goal or duty. It was merely an effect. The cause was a man's right to pursue his own good. It is this right, not its consequences, that represents the moral justification of capitalism. Okay, so that's a summation really of what I've said. It's not the goods that capitalism produces are a consequence of something else and something more fundamental. And that what is more fundamental is that you have a right to pursue your own good. Okay, you have a right to your own life. You have a right to self-determine what's going to happen, and that means that you're going to have to deal with me, who also has that same right, and other people, according to the non-aggression axiom, which means by persuasion or reason or exchange or contract or something like that, rather than force. Okay. So that's what she thinks you have to secure first, and then you'll get the wealth effects and the benefits that come from capitalism. Okay, I think some of these I might say, have already said, but let's look at it quickly again. What exactly is ideal? Well, as I said, we don't have such a system exactly in place. A lot of what the book is about is the unrealized potential of individuals, and her argument is that that unrealized potential of each of us is best served in a society where liberty or freedom are the predominant institutional arrangement, so that what you have to offer it's possible for you to offer it. You're not in somebody else's behest, you're not doing what they want, but you're actually working out the things that you can do best and finding people who can appreciate it. Same thing with society. Societies have unrealized potential as well. Freedom brings out the most and best in them, and I'm sure Tom and others will talk about how societies actually flourish by being free. But it's the same basic point, that freedom and flourishing are very much interconnected. Whether you're talking about the individual or you're talking about societies as a whole, both of them go together. I want to, Rand is very much focused upon individual flourishing in the book. I want to just say some things about markets as forms of social bonding, as ways people relate and can relate to each other, can connect to each other. So it's not simply an individualistic system, but it is a form of mutual advantage, and that I'll be talking about as well as we go on. But I don't want to suggest that it's the only principle that people cooperate with. There are many other aspects of human well-being as well. Possibility of liberty, this is ideal in a sense too. And I suppose that this Freedom School, as other groups like this, are testimony to the ideal. We're still struggling for liberty. Liberty is still something that we don't have and that we want to see. Sort of said that the capitalist order unleashes an engine of creativity. I want to emphasize again that we can't think only in terms of trade, because trade is something that all societies have, the exchange of one good for another. So, what is it that encourages trade? What is it that makes trade possible? What is it that creates wealth as opposed to simply moving wealth around? I have no problem with the word trade, but to me, trade suggests, the movement of goods, whereas what Rand is really interested in is how do you develop them? How do you encourage people to develop them? How do you encourage innovation? How do you encourage new things to trade? Well, that comes from, again, the system of liberty that she's advocating that we're calling capitalism. Okay, well, I just sort of said that. The capital system, the innovations, the freedom that you have provide incentives to innovate. And once again, where does innovation come from? Well, it comes from the mind. Okay? If things don't exist, they're not going to exist on their own. Somebody's got to think about them. Somebody's got to come up with the idea. Somebody has to put their mind to work in order to transform, the world as it now exists into a different world. And for human beings, that comes from the mind. So again, when you read the book, there's a lot of emphasis upon the importance of the mind. The mind is the central aspect of human existence, not only to sustain us, but to help us flourish and grow as well. Calling this no reality. First thing that I think we're going to say more of this weekend, probably more from Tom and me, is that capitalism works. It actually does do the things that we've just said theoretically. It promises, it encourages innovation. It actually helps create wealth. It provides an institution for sustaining that wealth, for transferring that wealth among people, to encouraging the dissemination of the scope of wealth. I mean, all of that does seem to be the case in capitalism. Rand is very big about what I'm calling, for lack of a better term, unification of mind and body. One way for you to get wealth, of course, is to go rob your neighbor. Okay, that kind of conquest version of wealth has been a very strong part of human history. One society goes in, they take the stuff another society has, and they become wealthier. Well, that's what I'm calling sort of the body side of things, and that's what she's saying capitalism is against. It's not a system of conquest. It's not a system of me robbing you or taking from you to enhance myself. It's not that at all, okay? On the other hand, it isn't just dreams either. It isn't sitting around and wishing the world would change. You actually have to go out and do something. So I call that, as she would herself, unification of mind and body that isn't simply one without the other. The three countries are the prosperous ones, so it may be a little hard to see this exactly. It's a prettier color, but my colors are not coming through on the screen here. Pretty much the darker the country, the more freedom it has. This is the Heritage Foundation Freedom Index. Look at the world from the most free to the least free countries in the world. So typically, you might have the U.S. or Canada, Australia is free, Malaysia does pretty well. There are, of course, some societies you can't really see the colors here, which are very unfree. Okay. Again, you might not be able to see the details of this chart, but what you find out very simply is that the freer the countries are, the wealthier they tend to be, okay, on balance. So the very unfree societies also tend to be very poor. The free societies tend to be wealthy. And this, again, is just a kind of empirical verification of Rand's thesis that, in fact, freedom encourages innovation, encourages creativity, encourages the production of wealth. I thought I'd say some things about what people say is wrong with capitalism. You probably know most of these things, but we can go through them anyway. Some have said this is a kind of Marxist statement, it serves the interests of capital.